Hello, hello, and how is everybody today? Welcome to Story Time with Jev. That's me. What am I going to say? I have ADHD. I get lost, even in my own thoughts. Sorry about that. I also get lost in the middle of a sentence when I'm reading it. It's quite funny sometimes. What else? I read old-fashioned children's stories, such as ones that I grew up reading and ones that my parents grew up reading and even ones that my grandparents grew up reading. It's lots of fun, actually, having shared memories and shared experiences, even if they weren't actually shared at the same time, but the same things that you have experienced, such as reading the same books as each other. And it's worth trying. It's worth trying, honestly. I don't chat when I'm reading, generally. As in, I don't chat if you're writing in the chat box or making comments below if you're watching it over on YouTube. I read live on Twitch, and then I put the recordings over onto YouTube about 2 weeks later. Sorry, itchy. I've got the itchies. I've just been looking at the cat without touching him. I'm not allergic, but I am very sensitive. My nerves are very sensitive to things, so I often notice things like that. So that's just the way it is. Anyway, so you can chat in the chat box. I will not actually make comments to what you say in the chat box until I'm between chapters. I will also chat at the beginning like I'm doing now and at the very end sometimes, if I remember. Otherwise, I just click the off button. That's the way it works. I will, though, but I will interrupt myself to explain things if I think that what I'm reading about is something that you, the listeners, may not actually have had experience of or know of. I'm very, very aware of the fact that because of my old-fashioned reading tastes and experience, that there's a lot of things which are very normal for me to understand that not everybody else does. It's been that way my whole life. So I'll quite often interrupt myself to explain something along the way, or even share some experiences I've had personally, such as in some of the places that some of our stories are set that I've visited in real life, other things like that. And yeah, that's just the sort of stuff that happens. So my way of describing the way I read is that it's much more like bedtime stories than what it would be an audiobook. An audiobook is great, but they don't have that same real life feel to them. They're like a movie or a TV series where it's all done just so, and they've recorded and recorded and recorded until they've got everything perfect, whereas I just read raw, rough reads, and that's how I often describe them over on YouTube. So anyway, with all that in mind, we are currently reading Just William by Richmal Crompton. She's a lady who, as far as I can tell, didn't get married and didn't have kids, but wrote excellent stories about young lads who had the best of intentions, but often got into trouble for it. So we shall carry on reading. This is our 4th day that we've been reading from Just William. We're probably about 2/3 of the way through the book, but there are other books of his that we will read at some stage, just not immediately after we finish this one. So with that in mind, I shall read. So Just William by Richmal Crompton, and I'm reading Chapter 8, The Outlaws. Here we go. It was a half holiday, and William was in his bedroom making careful preparations for the afternoon. On the mantelpiece stood in readiness half a cake, the result of a successful raid on the larder, and a bottle of licorice water. This beverage was made by shaking up a piece of licorice in water. It was much patronised by the band of outlaws to which William belonged, and which met secretly every half-holiday in a disused barn about 1/4 of a mile from William's house. Half-holidays, we don't have them in New Zealand, but they used to at the time that this was written in England. It's you have school in the morning, but you have the afternoon off. That's usually a half-holiday, whereas a bank holiday is the whole day off. And everybody gets that, whereas a half holiday is a school holiday, that it's just for half a day. A lot of the children used to live within walking distance of the school, and so they'd go home at lunchtime, have lunch at home, and then they'd come back to school. Unlike us here in New Zealand, who used to get a bus ride to school, and you'd stay there the whole day, and you'd take sandwiches for lunch with you, and the school didn't provide lunch or anything else like that. Anyway, just different ways of doing things. Right, so I'll carry on. So far, the Outlaws had limited their activities to wrestling matches, adventure seeking, and culinary operations. The week before, they had cooked 2 sausages, which William had taken from the larder on Cook's Night Out, and had conveyed to the barn beneath his shirt and next to his skin. Perhaps cooked is too euphemistic a term. To be quite accurate, they had held the sausages over a smoking fire till completely blackened, and then consumed the charred remains with the utmost relish. William put the bottle of licorice water in one pocket and the half cake in another, and was preparing to leave the house in his usual stealthy fashion through the bathroom window, down the scullery roof, and down the water pipe hand over hand to the back garden. Even when unencumbered by the presence of a purloined half cake, William infinitely preferred this mode of exit to the simpler one of walking out of the front door. As he came out onto the landing, however, he heard the sound of the opening and shutting of the hall door, and of exuberant greetings in the hall. "Oh, I am so glad you've come, dear, and this is the baby. The duck. Well then, how's oo den? Goo." This was William's mother. "Oh, crumbs," said William, and retreated hastily. He sat down on his bed to wait till the coast was clear. Soon came the sound of footsteps ascending the stairs. "Oh, William," said his mother as she entered his room, "Mrs. Butler's come with her baby to spend the afternoon, and we've arranged to go out till tea time with the baby, but she's got such a headache. I'm insisting on her lying down for the afternoon in the drawing room, but she's so worried about the baby not getting out this nice afternoon." "Oh," said William without interest. "Well, Cook's out and Emma has to go get the tea and answer the door, and Ethel's away, and I told Mrs. Butler I was sure you wouldn't mind taking the baby out for a bit in the perambulator." That's not what I would have done. Anyway, William stared at her, speechless. The Medusa's classic expression of horror was as nothing to William's at that moment. Then he moistened his lips and spoke in a hoarse voice. "Me," he said, me take the baby out in a pram?" "Take a baby out in a pram?" "Well, dear," said his mother deprecatingly, "I know it's your half holiday, but you'd be out of doors getting the fresh air, which is the great thing. It's a nice baby in a nice pram, and not heavy to push, and Mrs. Butler would be so grateful to you." "Yes, I should think she'd be that," said William bitterly. "She'd have a right to be that if I took the baby out in a pram." "Now, William, I'm sure you'd like to help, and I'm sure you wouldn't like your father to hear that you wouldn't even do a little thing like that for poor Mrs. Butler, and she's got such a headache." "A little thing like that," repeated William out of the bitterness of his soul. But the fates were closing round him. He was aware that he would know no peace till he had done the horrible thing demanded of him. Sorrowfully and reluctantly he bowed to the inevitable. "All right," he muttered. "I'll be down in a minute." He heard them fussing over the baby in the hall. Then he heard his elder brother's voice. "You surely don't mean to say, Mother," Robert was saying with the crushing superiority of 18, "that you're going to trust that child to William?" "Well," said William's mother, "someone has to take him out. It's such a lovely afternoon. I'm sure it's very kind of William on his half-holiday too. And she's got such a headache." "Well, of course," said Robert in a voice of one who washes his hands of all further responsibility. "You know William as well as I do." "Oh dear," sighed William's mother, "and everything so nicely settled, Robert, and you must come and find fault with it all. If you don't want William to take him out, will you take him out yourself?" Robert retreated hastily to the dining room and continued his conversation from a distance. I don't want to take him out myself. Thanks very much, all the same. All I say is you know William as well as I do. I'm not finding fault with anything. I'm simply stating a fact. I really think she should have actually sent the baby out with Robert. Then William came downstairs. Here he is, dear, all ready for you, and you needn't go far away, just up and down the road if you like, but stay out till tea time. He's a dear little baby, isn't he? And isn't it a nice willy-billy den to take it out in a nice tata? That's a trip. While its mummy goes bye-byes den? William blushed for pure shame. He pushed the pram down to the end of the road and round the corner. In comparison with William's feelings, the feelings of some of the early martyrs must have been pure bliss. A nice way for an outlaw to spend the afternoon. He dreaded to meet any of his brother outlaws, yet, irresistibly and as a magnet, their meeting place attracted him. He wheeled the pram off the road and down the country lane towards the field which held their sacred barn. He stopped at the stile that led into the field and gazed wistfully across to the barn in the distance. The infant sat and sucked its thumb and stared at him. Finally, it began to converse. Blab, 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 blub, blub, blub. Oh, you shut up, said William crushingly. Annoyed at the prolonged halt, it seized its pram cover, pulled it off its hooks, and threw it into the road. While William was picking it up, it threw the pillow onto his head. Then it chuckled. William began to conceive an active dislike of it. Suddenly, the great idea came to him. His face cleared. He took a piece of string from his pocket and tied the pram carefully to the railings. Then, lifting the baby cautiously and gingerly out, he climbed the stile with it and set off across the fields towards the barn. He held the baby to his chest with both arms clasped tightly round its waist. Its feet dangled in the air. Sorry, I'm just checking. I thought my phone was trying to say something. No, not at the moment. That's good. He held the baby tight to his chest with both arms clasped tightly round its waist, its feet dangling in the air. It occupied the time by kicking William in the stomach, pulling his hair, and putting its fingers in his eyes. That sounds about typical. It beats me, panted William to himself. What people see in babies scratching and kicking and blinding folks and pulling their hair all out. Excuse me. When he entered the barn, he was greeted by a sudden silence. Look here, began one outlaw in righteous indignation. It's a kidnap, said William triumphantly. We'll get a ransom on it. They gazed at him in awed admiration. This was surely the cream of outlawry. He set the infant on the ground, where it toddled for a few steps and sat down suddenly and violently. It then stared fixedly at the tallest boy present and smiled seraphically. That means like an angel. Dad, 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 Dad. Douglas, the tallest boy, grinned sheepishly. It thinks I'm its father, he explained complacently to the company. Well, said Henry, who was William's rival for the leadership of the Outlaws, what do we do first? That's the question. In books, said the outlaw called Ginger, they write a note to its people and say they want a ransom. We won't do that, not just yet, said William, hastily. Well, it's not much sense holding something to ransom and not telling folks that they've got to pay or nothing, is it? Said Ginger with the final air of a man whose logic is unassailable. No, said William, but, with a gleam of hope, who's got a paper and pencil? I'm simply stating a fact. Who's got a paper and pencil? No one spoke. Oh, yes, went on William in triumph. Go on, write a note without paper and pencil, and we'll all watch. Well, said Ginger sulkily, I don't suppose they had paper and pencil in outlaw days. They weren't invented. They wrote on leaves or something, he ended vaguely. Well, go on, write on leaves, said William, still more triumphant. We're not stopping you, are we? I'm simply stating a fact. Write on leaves. They were interrupted by a yell of pain from Douglas. Flattered by the parental relations so promptly established by the baby, he had ventured to make its further acquaintance. With vague memories of his mother's treatment of infants, he had inserted a finger in its mouth. The infant happened to possess 4 front teeth, 2 upper and 2 lower, and they closed like a vice upon Douglas's finger. He was now examining the marks. "Look, right deep down. See it? What you think of that? Nearly to the bone. Pretty savage baby you've brought along," he said to William. "I jolly well know that," said William feelingly. "It's your own fault for touching it. It's all right if you leave it alone. Just don't touch it, that's all. Anyway, it's mine, and I never said you could go fooling about with it, did I? It wouldn't bite me, I bet." "Well, what about the ransom?" persisted Henry. "Someone can go and tell its people and bring back the ransom," suggested Ginger. There was a short silence. Then Douglas took his injured finger from his mouth and asked pertinently, "Who?" "William brought it," suggested Henry. "Yes, so I bet I've done my share," said William. "Well, what's anyone else going to do, I'd like to know? Go round to every house in this old place and ask if they've had a baby taken off them and if they'd pay a ransom for it back? That's sense, isn't it? You know where you got it from, don't you? And you can go and get its ransom." "I can, but I'm not going to," said William finally. "I'm simply stating a fact. I'm not going to. And if anyone says I daren't," glancing round pugnaciously, there's a word for you, look that one up, "I'll fight him for it." And that's a hint as to what it means. No one said he daren't. The fact was too patent to need stating. Henry hastily changed the subject. "Anyway, what have we brought for the feast?" William produced the licorice water and half cake. Douglas 2 slices of raw ham and a dog biscuit. Ginger some popcorn and some cold boiled potatoes wrapped up in newspaper. Henry a cold apple dumpling and a small bottle of paraffin oil, which in New Zealand we would call kerosene. It's used as lamp oil. Pugnacious. Lemon's being very, very helpful and finding words for us. Pugnacious. Learn to pronounce adjective eager or quick to argue, quarrel or fight. His public statements became increasingly pugnacious. "I knew the wood would be wet after the rain, and it's to make the fire burn. That's sense, isn't it?" "Only one thing to cook," said Ginger sadly, looking at the slices of ham. "We can cook up the potatoes and the dumpling. They don't look half enough cooked. Let's put them on the floor here and go out for adventures first, all different ways and back in a quarter of an hour." The Outlaws generally spent part of the afternoon dispersed in search of adventure. So far they had wooed the goddess of danger, chiefly by trespassing on the ground of irascible farmers. There's another word for you, irascible. Farmers in hopes of a chase, which were generally fulfilled. They deposited their store on the ground in a corner of the barn, and with a glance at the kidnap, who was seated happily upon the floor engaged in chewing its hat strings, they went out, carefully closing the door. "Oh my goodness, what is going to happen?" After a quarter of an hour, Ginger and William arrived at the door simultaneously from opposite directions. "Any luck?" "No." "Same here. Let's start the old fire going." They opened the door and went in. The infant was sitting on the floor among the stores, or rather among what was left of the stores. There was paraffin oil on its hair, face, arms, frock, and feet. It was drenched in paraffin oil. The empty bottle and its hat lay by its side. Mingled with the paraffin oil all over its person was cold boiled potato. In other words, it had scrunched it all up and smeared it all over the place. Oh dear. It was holding the apple dumpling in its hand. "Ball," it announced ecstatically from behind its mask of potato and paraffin oil. They stood in silence for a minute. Then, "Who's going to make that fire burn now?" said Ginger, glaring at the empty bottle. Yes, said William slowly, and who's going to take that baby home? I'm simply stating a fact. Who's going to take that baby home? I'm just going to read another word that Lemon has provided for us. I know I don't normally do the chat thing during readings, but this is relevant. Lemon says, sorry, I quickly pulled that off Google. Yeah, that's the sort of thing I do. I'll be watching a YouTube video and they'll mention a place or a word that I don't know, and I'll be looking them up. I'll hit pause sometimes and I'll be looking that up while I'm still listening to the video. That's a good way to remember. I always imagined an ornery little pug with that word. Yes, pug dogs seem to be ornery, wanting to fight, wanting to contend with you about something. It's a good way to help you remember the word, actually. And irascible, having or showing a tendency to be easily angered. An irascible man. It's kind of like irritated, but up a few notches. Very good. Well done. Thank you very much. And thank you for the birthday wishes too. And I hope you have a wonderful, yummy dinner. Yes, quite a few notches. And it's also a tendency, a behavioural tendency or a personality tendency rather than just the state that you're currently in. Right. I'm just saying, that's all. Who's going to take the baby home, said William. There was no doubt that when William condescended to adopt a phrase from any of his family's vocabularies, he considerably overworked it. So, yes, I'm just simply stating a fact. That's because Robert was saying it just before, so he's got a new phrase that he can use. Well, it did itself. Well, it did it itself. Sorry, I'm trying to keep track of the it's in the sentence. It's no one else's fault, is it? No, it's not, said William, but that's the sort of thing folks never see. Anyway, I'm going to wash its face. What with? William took out his grimy handkerchief and advanced upon his prey. His bottle of licorice water was lying untouched in the corner. He took out the cork. Going to wash it in that dirty stuff? It's made of water. Clean water. I made it myself, so I bet I ought to know, oughtn't I? That's what folks wash in, isn't it? Clean water? Yes, bitterly. And what are we going to drink, I'd like to know? You think that baby's got enough of our stuff, our potatoes and our apple dumpling and our oil, without you going and giving it our licorice water as well? William was passing his handkerchief, moistened with licorice water, over the surface of the baby's face. The baby had soon caught a corner of it firmly between its teeth and refused to release it. If you got to take this baby home like this, he said, you wouldn't be thinking much about drinking licorice water. I'm simply stating— Oh, shut up saying that, said Ginger in sudden exasperation. I'm sick of it. At that moment the door was flung open and in walked slowly a large cow, closely followed by Henry and Douglas. Oh dear, oh dear. Yes, can you see trouble coming? Henry's face was one triumphant beam. He felt that his prestige, eclipsed by William's kidnapping coup, was restored. I have brought a cow, he announced. Fetched it all the way from Farmer Litton's field, 5 fields off, too. And it took some fetching, too. Well, what for? Said William after a moment's silence. Henry gave a superior laugh. What for? You've not read much about Outlaws, I guess. Sorry, I'm just getting my chair a little bit more comfortable and trying not to lean back too much. You've not read much about Outlaws, I guess. They always drove in cattle from the surrounding districts. Well, what for? Said William again, giving a tug at his handkerchief, which the infant still refused to release. Well, to kill and roast, I suppose, said Henry lamely. Usually outlaws go after cows and do cattle rustling because they're going to resell them. Yes. Well, go on, said William. Kill it and roast it. We're not stopping you, are we? Kill it and roast it and get hung for murder. I suppose it's murder to kill cows, same as it is to kill people, except for butchers. The cow advanced slowly and deprecatingly towards the kidnap, who promptly dropped the handkerchief and beamed with joy. Bow wow, it said excitedly. Anyway, let's get on with the feast, said Douglas. Feast, said Ginger bitterly. Feast? Not much feast left. That baby William brought's used all the paraffin oil and potatoes. And it's squashing the apple dumpling, and William's washed its face in the licorice water. Henry gazed at it dispassionately and judicially. Yes, it looks as if someone had washed it in licorice water, and as if it had used up all the oil and potatoes. It doesn't look like it. It doesn't look like as if it would fetch much ransom. You seem to have pretty well mucked it up. Oh, shut up about the baby, said William, picking up his damp and now prune-coloured handkerchief. I'm just about sick of it. Come on with the fire. They made a little pile of twigs in the field and began the process of lighting it. Oh, so many possibilities of things going wrong, aren't there? I hope that cow won't hurt the kidnap, said Douglas suddenly. Go and see, William, it's your kidnap. Well, it's Henry's cow, and I'm sorry for that cow if it tries playing tricks on that baby. But he rose from his knees reluctantly and threw open the barn door. The cow and the baby were still gazing admiringly at each other. From the cow's mouth, at the end of a long sodden ribbon, hung the chewed remains of the baby's hat. The baby was holding up the dog biscuit and crowed delightfully as the cow bent down its head and cautiously and gingerly smelt it. As William entered, the cow turned round and switched its tail against the baby's head. At the piercing howl that followed, because, yes, it can get a bit uncomfortable if you get flicked with the tail of a large animal. Go for it, Lemon. Carry on with doing the food prep. That's the important thing. Don't worry about words here. We'll cope. At the piercing howl that followed, the whole band of outlaws entered the barn. What are you doing to the poor little thing? Said Douglas to William. It's Henry's cow, said William despairingly. It hit it. Oh, go on, shut up. Do shut up. The howls redoubled. You brought it, said Henry accusingly, raising his voice to be heard above the baby's fury and indignation. Can't you stop it? Not much sense taking babies about if you don't know how to stop them crying. Here's a picture. From the cow's mouth hung the chewed remains of the hat. The cow and the baby gazed admiringly at each other, and in the baby's hand is the dog biscuit. There's the baby, there's the dog biscuit, there's the cow with the hat hanging from its mouth, and there's William looking in the door of the barn to see how it's all going. I'll just read that last sentence again. Not much sense taking babies about if you don't know how to stop them crying. The baby was now purple in the face. The outlaws stood around and watched it helplessly. Perhaps it's hungry, suggested Douglas. He took up the half cake from the remains of the stores and held it out tentatively to the baby. The baby stopped crying suddenly. Dad, 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 it said tearfully. Douglas blushed and grinned. Keeps on thinking I'm its father, he said with conscientious superiority. Here, like some cake? The baby broke off a handful and conveyed it to its mouth. It's eating it, cried Douglas in shrill excitement. After thoroughly masticating it, that's chewing, masticating it. However, the baby repented of its condescension and ejected the mouthful in several instalments. William blushed for it. Oh, come on, let's go and look at the fire, he said weakly. They left the barn and returned to the scene of the fire lighting. The cow, still swinging the remains of the baby's hat from its mouth, was standing with its front feet firmly planted on the remains of what had been a promising fire. Not going so well then. "Look," cried William in undisguised pleasure. "Look at Henry's cow. Pretty nice sort of cow you've brought, Henry. Not much sense taking cows about if you can't stop them putting folks' fires out." After a heated argument, the outlaws turned their attention to the cow. The cow refused to be shooed off. It simply stood immovable and stared them out. Ginger approached cautiously and gave it a little push. It switched its tail into his eye and continued to munch the baby's hat string. Upon William's approaching, it lowered its head, and William retreated hastily. At last they set off to collect some fresh wood and light a fresh fire. Soon they were blissfully consuming 2 blackened slices of ham, the popcorn, and what was left of the cake. After the feast, Ginger and William, as wild Indians, attacked the barn, which was defended by Douglas and Henry. The kidnap crawled around inside on all fours, picking up any treasures it might come across en route, and testing their effect on its palate. In other words, it put everything in its mouth, tasted it, because babies do that. I'm just going to move my light. It's a little bit close. Sorry. That's because I'm sitting slightly differently to usual. Anyway, we'll carry on. Occasionally it carried on a conversation with its defenders, bringing with it a strong perfume of paraffin oil as it approached. Blab, 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 dad, 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 goo. William had insisted on a place on the attacking side of the teams. "I couldn't put any feeling," he explained, "into fighting for that baby." When they finally decided to set off homewards, William gazed hopelessly at his charge. Its appearance defies description. Remember, it's been crawling around on the floor of a barn. For many years afterwards, William associated babies in his mind with paraffin oil and potato. "Just help me get the potato out of its hair," he pleaded. "Never mind the oil and the rest of it." "My hat, doesn't it smell funny? And doesn't it look funny? All oil and potato and bits of cake," said Ginger. "Oh, shut up about it," said William irritably. The cow followed them down to the stile and watched them sardonically as they climbed it. "Bow wow," murmured the baby in affectionate farewell. William looked wildly round for the pram, but the pram was gone. Only the piece of string dangled from the railings. "Crumbs," said William. "Talk about bad luck. I'm simply stating a fact. Talk about bad luck." At that minute, the pram appeared, charging down the hill at full speed with a cargo of small boys. At the bottom of the hill, it overturned into a ditch, accompanied by its cargo. To judge from its appearance, it had passed the afternoon performing the operation. "That's my pram," said William to the cargo as it emerged joyfully from the ditch. And I'm going to show you the picture. There you go. There's William holding on to the baby. Whoop, trying to get it so it shows well for you. Holding on to the baby and pointing at them and saying, "That's my pram," to the boys in the ditch with the pram, the little young boys. "Gone, sours, we found it." "Well, I left it there." "Come on, we'll fight for it," said Ginger, rolling up his sleeves in a business-like manner. The other outlaws followed his example. The pram's cargo eyed them appraisingly. "Oh, all right, take your rotten old pram," they said at last. Douglas placed the baby in its seat, and William thoughtfully put up the hood to shield his charge as far as possible from the curious gaze of the passers-by. His charge was now chewing the pram cover and talking excitedly to itself. With a heart steeled for any fate, William turned the corner into his own road. The baby's mother was standing at his gate. "There you are," she called. "I was just getting quite anxious. Thank you so much, dear." But that is what, and then in capital letters, but that is what she said before she saw the baby. Ooh, troubles afoot. And that's the end of the chapter, by the way. So, they're going to leave that one to our imagination, I think, because it's the end of the chapter. Right, so Lemon is cooking tacos for dinner tonight, and it's going real quick. Yes, tacos are often quite quick to prepare. We do burritos, and yeah, they're one of the nice, easy, quick ones to do. We usually use a packet mix for the flavouring, and the particular one we use has bean powder in it, bean flour, and so it actually thickens it up nicely, and they're quite yummy. What else do we do? What are we doing tonight? I've got minced beef out, and I've got some garlic pitta pockets. They're only about this big. They're not particularly big ones, but they're ones that have garlic butter squirted inside them before, and then it goes firm in the fridge sort of thing. And then when you take them out, you then heat them up, and they're really yummy. So I'll probably do some sort of mince with maybe a Moroccan spice mix, a little bit like Shawa spice mix with the mince. And then we can shred up some lettuce or whatever, carrots. I don't think I've got lettuce, so it'll be shredded carrots, grated carrot, a little bit of yogurt. G'day roosters, how are you? Good to see you here. We're just talking food at the moment because it's a chapter break, and Lemon's cooking tacos for dinner. In fact, by now Lemon may have actually finished cooking tacos and be eating them. Yum. And so I'm just talking about the sort of things that we usually do, which is like burritos. We often have food that is finger food that you hold in your hands when you're eating it, rather than using cutlery. It was something that we started a long time ago. Oh, caramelizing onions. Gotta caramelize the onions. I can't, and sadly, I can't eat them any other way. Raw onions give me a migraine. It's just one of those things. And it's not every time. It's depends on how much onion I eat. It's not nice anyway. I love the flavour of them, but then I get the smell from having eaten them. Doesn't matter if you brushed your teeth or not. And after a while, that gives me a migraine. It's terrible. It's terrible because I like the flavour of them, and I'd like to be able to eat them. But so it's just not worth it. But caramelized onions, especially if you put a little bit of butter in there as well. Oh, nice. So much flavour. So much flavour. It's so good. I have found that I can tolerate onions that are technically raw if I've diced them finely and then poured boiling water through them, and it takes out, I mean, they're not as strongly flavoured, unfortunately, but it takes out the part that makes it, so it's not good for me. Anyway, so I was talking about my dinner too. Moroccan spiced beef mince and garlic buttered pita bread, small pita bread, which we'll warm and toast slightly, and a little bit of shredded carrot because I haven't got any lettuce. We often don't have different ingredients, so you just find something that's suitable. So grated carrot is really good for that. A little bit of yogurt, sour yogurt, not sweetened yogurt. That's the only sort of yogurt that I tend to buy because you can use it as an ingredient, and you can add things to it like jam to make it sweet yogurt. Olives. Yeah, olives. I don't have any tomatoes at the moment. That's a shame because they're really nice in it. What else? I don't have. Oh, I do have some radish, but it's daikon radish instead of normal European radish. So that'll be grated to use as well. So that'll be yum. That'll give it a bit of zing, a bit of bite to the flavour. So yeah, Phil eats it with a knife and fork, and he just piles everything on his plate, whereas Joel and I cut the top off the pita bread and stuff everything inside it. I do the same thing if I'm using chickpea patties, what do you call them? Falafel. And those, instead of buying the mix to make them, I actually just buy it pre-made, the mix, and then I don't follow the instructions, because following the instructions the daikon that I have has a bit of zing to it. It's because it's been sitting in the fridge for a while, and as it ages, it gets a bit zingy. Or it might be another variety, but it looks like a daikon. Yeah, the texture on it's really good. Falafel, don't fry them if you're making them up, because the moisture in them makes them spit. And also they fall apart really easily. So what you do, this is a Jev food tip. So I hope you're taking notes. If you've got falafel mix and you're using it, pre-made falafel mix, or you make it up yourself, what you do is you get an oven tray, you spray it with oil, or you spread oil on it or butter or something like that. I don't really care. Turn the oven on to grill and get it nice and hot while you're doing this. And then you get a dessert spoon. That's the sort you use for eating breakfast or anything else like that. And you take part spoonfuls and you dollop them onto this tray and keep them as separate little, I'm waving my hands around down below where you can see them, as separate little lumps about the size of a 50-cent piece New Zealand. I'm not sure. Probably you'd call it a silver dollar. I don't know. And then flatten them out to about that thick, about half an inch, 12, 15 mils thick. And then put them all on. And if you've got oil, you spray some oil over the top as well, but you don't have to. And then you put it in under the grill. So, yeah, probably actually. Our 50-cent piece, our old 50-cent piece, sorry, I just realised. Actually, no, it's probably more like our old 20-cent piece. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So it's about an inch to an inch and a half across. Don't worry about making them round. Just put dollops down. Keep the edges pulled in with the tip of your spoon, just to rearrange them, and pat them down on top to get them nice and smoothish on top. Spray some oil over, put them under the grill, and just keep an eye on them so they don't actually burn. And by the time they've got nicely browned on top without being burnt, the tray itself will have heated up a little bit, and that will heat them from the underside, and they'll be cooked through. I mean, the chickpea's cooked anyway, so it's not a problem. You're just heating it all up. But they won't be dry. It's one of the problems with when you're making falafel, is often they just get so dry. Anyway, so it's really yummy. And then you let them cool just for a couple of minutes on the tray, lift them off with your fish slice or whatever it is that you usually use in your frying pan, put them in a bowl, put them on the table so everyone can help themselves. Yeah, really yummy. And then if you want a snack the next day, you get some sour cream in a small container of sour cream, like in a cup, bottom of a cup, because I usually get a big thing of sour cream. Put some in a cup, and then you have these as cold snacks, and you take a falafel and you dip it in the sour cream and then you eat them. That's also really yummy. But yeah, when they're hot, you just pop them in your pitta pockets. And we're not having falafel tonight, but we're having mince instead. Minced beef. Beef mince. Ground beef. There you go. And I'm going to get on with the next chapter before I get too hungry. Actually, I do have something to eat here. What have I got? How do I do my mince? I fry up some onion, like you've caramelized yours. I dice it and then I fry it. So it's golden brown and soft-ish. Put a bit of garlic in with it. Never put your garlic in until the onion's nearly completely cooked, because garlic burns really quickly. The oils in it stick to the bottom of the frying pan. This is many, 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 many years of cooking practice here. No, I don't bother with leeks in it. No. So then I put the mince in with the garlic and onion and I brown it. And when I say brown it, that's just I'm cooking it over the heat in the frying pan so that it's not looking all pink. And I keep on poking at it with my frying pan stirry thing. It's a flat-edged wooden one, a bit like a fish slice, but it's wooden. And then stir it around and turn it over. Because I don't like really big hard lumps of mince. I like it broken down a little bit. Yeah, garlic oil. The oil in garlic is really sticky. I usually just buy it pre-crushed, but even then you still put a puddle of oil in the frying pan, and then you put your teaspoon or tablespoon of garlic into the puddle, and gently stir it a little bit, but also hold your lid so it doesn't spit at you, because the moisture that's in it from when you've got the pre-crushed stuff from the supermarket makes it spit when it hits the oil. And don't actually put the lid on, just hold the lid as a shield. If you cook your garlic with the lid on, in a frying pan like that, it changes the flavour and it's got this unpleasant burpy flavour to it. Whereas if you leave the lid off when it's cooking, it actually it keeps all the nice yummy flavour of it without it making it quite so burpy. Yeah, that's it, exactly. You kind of want to sweat out the sticky oils, but let the meat or whatever get fragranced with it. That's the way. I usually actually make sure my garlic is cooked before I put the meat in, and then I mix it through, because otherwise you once again get that burpy flavour in it. Yeah, it's like getting all the acid out of tomatoes by sweating it for a bit before mixing it. The tomatoes change their colour, and also the oil separates again when they're actually cooked enough before you put the other things in with it. And that's something I've learnt to do with doing all the Indian style dishes that we've done more recently. So the mince I put in, I cook it, brown it, breaking up the thing, and then I chuck in any other vegetables near the other bits and pieces if I'm doing it. If I'm doing spaghetti bolognese, once the mince is browned, I will chuck in some chopped tinned tomatoes. Never bother with raw for that, because you've got to cook the tomatoes too long. And some tomato paste, which is the thick stuff, not the stuff that's like pureed tomatoes. Italian herbs, that sort of thing. If I'm doing Moroccan, I will chuck in maybe some grated carrot for texture, or some chickpeas maybe, and then some Moroccan spices. Usually I just use a Moroccan spice mix that I get from the supermarket, but I can do it with cumin and coriander are the two dominant flavours in that. A little tiny bit of cinnamon, but not too much, because when your nose smells cinnamon, it expects a sweet flavour, and it's this tension that doesn't quite work as well. And also the same, you can put a tiny bit of cloves in it. It's another one where you just want it to influence the flavour, but not actually be a flavour of its own. Yeah, Julia Child is great for teaching people how aspects of cooking to make it work. So I'm now going to read before I get hungrier. Yeah, and then you cook them until they're done. Once you've got your garlic cooked enough, garlic and onion cooked enough and mixed through with your meat or whatever you're cooking, vegetables if you're doing a vegetarian dish, then you can put the lid back on. It's just while the actual garlic is cooking that I leave the lid off, because of the way it affects it. Yeah, if you're used to cinnamon as part of the savoury flavours, it works really, really well in chilies and stuff like that. That's wonderful. I grew up where if you're having something that's got cinnamon in it, most recipes say, I'll put a teaspoon of cinnamon in, and you taste it and you go like, this meant to be cinnamon in this? And so when you make it yourself, you put in a heaped tablespoon of cinnamon. And so the strength of that sort of cinnamon flavour is the sort of thing that my mouth associates with sweet things like hot cross buns. Yeah, and that sort of stuff. Anyway, yeah, you go and check your onions. I hope that we didn't burn them because I was talking too much. And I am going to read the next chapter. So, hi, if you're new here, I'm Jev, and I read old-fashioned children's stories, and we're currently reading Just William by Richmal Crompton. And we are reading chapter 9, which is called William and the White Satin. William and the White Satin. I'd simply love to have a page, murmured Miss Grant wistfully. Oh dear. A page at a wedding, like a bridesmaids and groomsmen, flower girl and page boy. Miss Grant, I think, was the one that we met in the first chapter when William was trying to help his sister, because he thought that the young gentleman was actually fond of his sister, Ethel, but it turns out he was fond of Miss Grant. So anyway, I'd simply love to have a page, murmured Miss Grant wistfully. A wedding seems so second-rate without a page. Mrs. Brown, her aunt and hostess, looked across the tea table at her youngest son, who was devouring iced cake with that disregard for consequences which is the mark of youth. There's William, she said doubtfully. Then, you've had quite enough cake, William. Miss Grant studied William's countenance, which at that moment expressed intense virtue, persecuted beyond all bearing. Enough, he repeated. I've had hardly any yet. I was only just beginning to have some when you looked at me. It's a plain cake. It won't do me any harm. I wouldn't eat it if it would do me harm. Sugar's good for you. Animals eat it to keep healthy. Horses eat it and it don't do them any harm. And poll parrots and things eat it and it don't do them any. Oh, don't argue, William, said his mother wearily. William's gift of eloquence was known and feared in his family circle. He gets off on explaining something and they don't get a word in edgewise, and that's often easier just to resign yourself to whatever it is that he's saying. So they try to stop him getting too far. William's gift of eloquence is known and feared in his family circle. Then Miss Grant brought out the result of her study of his countenance. He's got such a modern face, she said. There's something essentially medieval and romantic about the idea of a page. Mrs. Brown, from whose house the wedding was to take place, looked worried. There's nothing medieval or romantic about William, she said. Well, Miss Grant's intellectual face lit up. What about his cousin Dorita? They're about the same age, aren't they? Both 11. Well, the two of them in white satin with bunches of holly, don't you think? Would you mind having her to stay for the ceremony? Miss Grant always referred to her wedding as the ceremony. If you don't have his hair cut for a bit, he mightn't look so bad. Dear. I'm going to suggest you look at paintings of the little boy in the blue outfit. It wasn't Constable, it was the other guy. One of those English artists. Yeah. And I think that's probably the sort of picture she has in her mind. William had retired to the garden with his 3 bosom friends, Ginger, Henry and Douglas, where he was playing his latest game of mountaineering. A plank had been placed against the garden wall, and up this scrambled the 3, roped together and wearing feathers in their caps. William was wearing an old golf cap of his mother's and mentally pictured himself as an impressive and heroic figure. Before they reached the top, they inevitably lost their foothold, rolled down the plank, and fell in a confused and bruised heap at the bottom. The bruises in no way detracted from the charm of the game. To William, the fascination of any game consisted mainly in the danger to life and limb involved. The game had been suggested by an old alpenstock, which had been thoughtlessly presented to William by a friend of Mr. Brown's. The paint of the staircase and upstairs corridor had been completely ruined before the family knew of this gift. And the alpenstock had been confiscated for a week, then restored on the condition that it was not to be brought into the house. The result was the game of mountaineering up the plank. They carried the alpenstock in turns, but William had 2 turns running to mark the fact that he was its proud possessor. Mrs. Brown approached William on the subject of his prospective role of page with a certain apprehension. The normal attitude of William's family towards William was one of apprehension. "Would you like to go to Cousin Sybil's wedding?" she said. "No, I wouldn't," said William without hesitation. "Wouldn't you like to go dressed up?" she said. "Red Injun?" said William with a gleam of hope. No, not exactly." "Pirate?" "Not quite." "I'd go as a Red Injun or I'd go as a pirate," he said firmly, "but I wouldn't go as anything else." "A page," said Miss Grant's clear, melodious voice, "is a medieval and romantic idea, William. There's the glamour of chivalry about it that should strongly appeal to a boy of your age." William turned his inscrutable countenance upon her and gave her a cold glare. They discussed his costume in private. Oh dear. This is obviously a different time. This is not when he was in the garden talking. So there he is sitting in the chair, and there's Cousin Sybil trying to persuade him. And he's looking rather glum. I don't know how well you can tell in that picture. "I've got a pair of lovely white silk stockings," said his mother. "They'd do for tights. And Ethel has got a satin petticoat that's just beginning to go in one place. I think that we could make some sort of costume from that." Oh, my goodness. I think we could make some sort of costume from that, don't you? We'll buy some more white satin and get some patterns. No, I won't wear Ethel's old clothes, said William, smouldering. You all just want to make me look ridiculous. You don't care how ridiculous I look. I shall be ridiculous all the rest of my life, going about in Ethel's old clothes. I just won't do it. I just won't go to any old wedding. No, I don't want to go see Cousin Sybil married, and I just won't be made to look ridiculous in Ethel's old clothes. They reasoned and coaxed and threatened, but in vain. Finally William yielded to parental authority and went about his world with an air of martyred doom to the stake. Even the game of mountaineering had lost its charm, and the alpenstock lay neglected against the garden wall. I'm thinking an alpenstock is one of those mountaineers, like an axe, with a hook-shaped top, I'm having trouble with words today. You can fill it in for yourself. The alpenstock lay neglected against the garden wall. The attitude of a select circle of friends was not encouraging. "Yeah, page! Who's going to be a page? Oh, crumbs, a page all dressed up in white. Dear little Willie, won't he look sweet?" Life became very full. It was passed chiefly in the avenging of insults. William cherished a secret hope that the result of this would be to leave him disfigured for life, and so unable to attend the wedding. However, except for a large lump on his forehead, he was none the worse. He eyed the lump thoughtfully in his looking-glass and decided that with a little encouragement it might render his public appearance in an affair of romance an impossibility. But the pain which resulted from one heroic effort at banging it against the wall caused him to abandon the plan. Dorita arrived the next week, and with her small brother Michael, aged 3. Dorita was slim and graceful, with a pale little oval face and dark curling hair, the ideal look, apparently, for that sort of thing. I would guess, that's my comment, by the way. Miss Grant received her on the doorstep. "Well, my little maid of honour," she said in her flute-like tones, "welcome. We're going to be such friends, you and me and William. The bride—" She blushed and bridled becomingly, meaning herself, the bride. "The bride and her little page and her little maid of honour. William's a boy, and he's just a little bit thoughtless and doesn't realise the romance of it all. I'm sure you will. I see it in your dear little face. We'll have some lovely talks together." Her eyes fell upon Michael and narrowed suddenly. He'd look sweet too in white satin, wouldn't he? Turning to Mrs. Brown, "He could walk between them. We could buy some more white satin." When they had gone, the maid of honour turned dark, long-lashed, demure eyes upon William. "Soft mug, that," she said in refined tones, nodding in the direction of the door, through which the tall figure of Miss Grant had just disappeared. William was vaguely cheered by her attitude. "Are you keen on this piffling wedding affair?" she went on carelessly, "'cause I jolly well tell you I'm not." So she might look all angelic, but I don't think she is inside. William felt that he had found a kindred spirit. He unbent so far as to take her to the stable and show her a field mouse he had caught and was keeping in a cardboard box. "I'm teaching it to dance," he confided, "and it ought to fetch a jolly lot of money when it can dance proper. Dancing mice do, you know. They show 'em on the stage, and people on the stage get pounds and pounds every night, so I bet mice do too, at least the folks the mice belong to what dance on the stage. I'm teaching it to dance by holding a biscuit over its head and moving it about. It bit me twice yesterday." He proudly displayed his mutilated finger. "I only caught it yesterday. It ought to learn all right today," he added hopefully. Her intense disappointment when the only trace of the field mouse that could be found was the cardboard box with a hole gnawed at one corner, drew William's heart to her still more. He avoided Henry, Douglas and Ginger. Henry, Douglas and Ginger had sworn to be at the church door to watch William descend from the carriage in the glory of his white satin apparel, and William felt that friendship could not stand the strain. He sat with Dorita on the cold and perilous perch of the garden wall and discussed Cousin Sybil and the wedding. Dorita's language delighted and fascinated William. "She's a soppy old loony," she would remark sweetly, shaking her dark curls. "The soppiest old loony you'd see in any old place on this old earth. You bet your life. She's made of sop. I wouldn't be found dead in a ditch with her, wouldn't touch her with the butt end of a barge pole." Here's a picture of the two of them sitting on the wall. And I don't know how well you can see it. So there's Dorita and there's William. But I have to see if I can put the pictures over on Discord. Sorry, I haven't already done it yet. William has a wonderful grin on his face, and as well as so does she. But the naughtiness of what they're doing and their understanding of each other's attitude. "She's an assified cow, she is. Huh. Those children are a little disappointing as regards character to a child lover like myself," confided Miss Grant to her intellectual fiancé. "I've tried to sound their depths, but there are no depths to sound. There's none of the mystery, the glamour, the clouds of glory about them. They are so material." The day of the ordeal drew nearer and nearer, and William's spirits sank lower and lower. His life seemed to stretch before him, youth, manhood, and old age, dreary and desolate, filled only with humiliation and shame. His prestige and reputation would be blasted forever. He would no longer be William the Red Indian, the pirate, the daredevil. He would simply be the boy who went to a wedding dressed in white satin. Evidently there would be a surging crowd of small boys at the church door. Every boy for miles around who knew William, even by sight, had volunteered the information that he would be there. William was to ride with Dorita and Michael in the bride's carriage. In imagination he already descended from the carriage and heard the chorus of jeers. His cheeks grew hot at the thought. His life for years afterwards would consist solely in the avenging of insults. I can imagine. He followed the figure of the blushing bride-to-be with a baleful glare. In his worst moments he contemplated murder. The violence of his outburst when his mother mildly suggested a wedding present to the bride from her page and maid of honour horrified her. "I've been made to look ridiculous all the rest of my life," he ended. "I'm not giving her no present. I know what I'd like to give her," he added darkly. "Yes, and I do too." Mrs. Brown forbore to question further. The day of the wedding dawned coldly bright and sunny. William's expressions of agony and complaints of various startling symptoms of serious illnesses were ignored by his experienced family circle. Michael was dressed first of the three in his minute white satin suit and sent down into the morning room to play quietly. Then an unwilling William was captured from the darkest recess of the stable and dragged pale and protesting to the slaughter. "Yes, and I'll die pretty soon, probably," he said pathetically, "and then perhaps you'll be a bit sorry, and I shan't care." In Michael there survived two of the instincts of primitive man, the instinct of foraging for food, and that of concealing it from his enemies. When found, earlier in the day he had paid a visit to the kitchen and found it empty. Upon the table lay a pound of butter and a large bag of oranges. These he had promptly confiscated, and with a fear of interruption born of experience, he had retired with them under the table in the morning room. Before he could begin his feast, he had been called upstairs to be dressed for the ceremony. On his return, immaculate in white satin, he found to his joy that his treasure trove had not been discovered. Oh, wonderful! Such mess ahead of us. His treasure trove had not been discovered. He began on the butter first. What he could not eat he smeared over his face and curly hair. Then he felt a sudden compunction and tried to remove all traces of the crime by rubbing his face and hair violently with a woolly mat. Then he sat down on the Chesterfield. That's a big a Chesterfield. I didn't know what one was until I was older. A Chesterfield is like a type of sofa or lounge suite. And it's usually leather, and it's quite straight-edged and rounded ends, and it's got big buttons. Chesterfield is just a common name for them, I suppose. Then he sat down on the Chesterfield and began the oranges. They were very yellow and juicy and rather overripe. He crammed them into his mouth with both little fat hands at once. Remember, he's only about 3. He was well aware, even at his tender years, that life's sweetest joys come soonest to an end. Orange juice mingled with wool fluff and butter on his small round face. It trickled down his cheeks and fell on his white lace collar. His mouth and the region round it were completely yellow. He had emptied the oranges out of the bag all around him on the seat. He was sitting in a pool of juice. His suit was covered with it, mingled with pips and skin, and still he ate on. His first interruption was William and Dorita, who came slowly downstairs, holding hands in silent sympathy, 2 gleaming figures in white satin. They walked to the end of the room. They also had been sent to the morning room with orders to play quietly until summoned. Play? William had echoed coldly. I don't feel much like playing. They stared at Michael, open-mouthed and speechless. Lumps of butter and bits of wool stuck in his curls and adhered to the upper portion of his face. They had been washed away from the lower portion by the orange juice. His suit was almost covered with it. Behind, he was saturated with it. Crumbs, said William at last. You'll catch it, remarked his sister. Michael retreated hastily from the scene of his misdeeds. Micketh good now, he lisped deprecatingly. Michael, his version of saying it. Miketh good now. Sorry, I'm having to sound it out. Miketh good now, he lisped deprecatingly. They looked at the seat he had left, a pool of crushed orange fragments and juice. Then they looked at each other. He'll not be able to go, said Dorita slowly. Again they looked at the empty, orange-covered Chesterfield, and again they looked at each other. Yep, it's definitely a leather-covered one, because if it was a normal fabric-covered one, it would have soaked into the foam of the seat, and so they wouldn't have had these puddles of orange juice that the children were looking at. No wonder they're talking about it being a Chesterfield. They looked at the Chesterfield, and again they looked at each other. He's quite good now, said Michael hopefully. Then the maid of honour, aware that cold deliberation often kills the most glorious impulses, seized William's hand. Sit down, quick, she whispered sharply. Without a word they sat down. They sat till they felt the cold moisture penetrate to their skins. Then William heaved a deep sigh. We can't go now, he said. Through the open door they saw a little group coming, Miss Grant in shining white, followed by William's mother arrayed in her brightest and best, and William's father, whose expression revealed a certain weariness, mingled with a relief that the whole would soon be over. Here's the old sardine all togged up, whispered Dorita. I wonder where she's got these expressions from. Probably from an older brother or somebody. Here's the old sardine all togged up, whispered Dorita. William, Dorita, Michael, they called. Slowly, William, Dorita, and Michael obeyed the summons. When Miss Grant's eyes fell upon the strange object that was Michael, she gave a loud scream. Michael! Oh, the dreadful child! She clasped the centre of the door and looked as though about to swoon. Michael began to sob. Poor Mickey, he said through his tears. He feels so thick. They removed him hastily. Never mind, dear, said Mrs. Brown soothingly. The other 2 look sweet. But Mr. Brown had wandered further into the room and thus obtained a sudden and startling view of the page and maid of honour from behind. What? Where? He began explosively. William and Dorita turned to him instinctively, thus providing Mrs. Brown and the bride with the spectacle that had so disturbed him. The bride gave a second scream, shriller and wilder than the first. "Oh, what have they done? Oh, the wretched children! And just when I wanted to feel calm, just when all depends on my feeling calm, just when—" We was walking round the room and we sat down on the Chesterfield and there was this stuff on it and it came on our clothes, explained William stonily and monotonously and all in one breath. I should probably read that again the way he said it then. "We was walking round the room and we sat down on the Chesterfield and there was this stuff on it and it came on our clothes," said William. It's more like it. I better read these comments because I think they're to do with what I'm reading. Hope be togged up in something, redirected from being togged be togged up in something. Is that the context? Yes. Togged up, that means all dressed up in their best togs, their best clothes. We've actually had in one of the previous ones the word togs for outfit, clothing. Yes. In New Zealand, we use the word togs for our bathing costume. Go and get your togs. But we also use it as slang for getting dressed up, getting all togged up. Yeah, so that's why. Dressed a certain way. Yeah, it's basically putting on a bunch of special clothes for something, and it's a really loose, old-fashioned slang word. It's not particularly nasty or anything, but it's just like, yeah, use the word. Go on, use the word. Yeah, I'm going to carry on. And it came on our clothes, explained William stonily and monotonously, and all in one breath. "Why did you sit down?" said his mother. "We were walking around and we just felt tired and we sat down on the Chesterfield and there was this stuff on it and it came on—" "Oh, stop! Didn't you see it there?" said his mother. William considered. "Well, we was just walking round the room," he said, "and we just felt tired and we sat—" "Stop saying that! Couldn't we make cloaks," wailed the bride, "to hang down and cover them all up behind? It wouldn't take long." She's got this set picture in her mind of how it has to be, hasn't she? Mr. Brown took out his watch. Here they are. There's Mr. Brown, having just discovered, and he says something, and so the two children turn around and you can see the dark marks are where the orange juice is on the back of their outfits. And there's the bride looking horrified. "The carriage has been waiting," Mr. Brown, "the carriage has been waiting a quarter of an hour already," he said firmly. "We've no time to spare. Come along, my dear. We'll continue the investigation after the service. You can't go, of course. You must stay home. Now," he ended, turning a stern eye upon William. There was an unconscious note of envy in his voice. "And I did so want to have a page," said Miss Grant plaintively as she turned away. Joy and hope returned to William with a bound. As the sound of wheels was heard down the drive, he turned head over heels several times on the lawn, then caught sight of his long-neglected alpenstock leaning against the wall. Climbing axe. Yeah. "Come on," he shouted joyfully. Yeah, whatever. I can't remember the right word for it. Joy and hope returned to William with a bound. I've read that bit. "Come on," he shouted joyfully. "I'll teach you a game I made up. It's mountaineering." She watched him place a plank against the wall and begin his perilous ascent. "You're a mug," she said in her clear, sweet voice. "I know a mountaineering game worth 10 of that old thing." And it says much for the character and moral force of the maid of honour that William meekly put himself in the position of pupil. Obviously, he's been quite impressed with her so far. Yes, they had wonderful style of clothing in the early 20s, the 1920s, not the 2020s. It must be explained at this point that the domestics of the Brown household were busy arranging refreshments in a marquee in the garden. The front hall was quite empty. Oh dear, more mischief. It was about quarter of an hour. In about quarter of an hour, the game of mountaineering was in full swing. Now, hang on a minute. If the servants of the house, the domestics of the house, were busy arranging refreshments in a marquee in the garden, that means that the wedding party is coming back to the Browns' house. Oh dear, what are they going to come across? So we'll carry on. On the lowest steps of the staircase reposed the mattress from William's father's and mother's bed. Above it, the mattress from Miss Grant's bed. Above that, the mattress from William's bed. And on the top, the mattress from Dorita's bed. In all the bedrooms, the bedclothes lay in disarray on the floor. Well, of course, because, I mean, how else are you going to get the mattresses? A few nails driven through the ends of the mattresses into the stairs secured the stability of the mountain. Still wearing their robes of ceremony, they scrambled up in stockinged feet, every now and then losing foothold and rolling down to the pile of pillows and bolsters, taken indiscriminately from all the beds. Bolsters are those long, they're round, varying sizes, and quite long that they used to put across the head of the bed. Probably for leaning on when you're sitting in bed reading, that sort of thing. That's a bolster. Down to the pile of pillows and bolsters which was arranged at the foot of the staircase. Their mirth was riotous and uproarious. They used the alpenstock in turns. It was a great help. They could get a firm hold on the mattresses with the point of the alpenstock. William stood at the top of the mountain, hot and panting, his alpenstock in his hand, and paused for breath. He was well aware that retribution was not far off. Was it the neighbouring church, to be quite exact? Was in the neighbouring church, to be quite exact, and would return in a carriage within the next few minutes. So he knew that he was going to get in trouble anyway, but he's making the most of it. Bolster, fancy pillow you'd throw on the ground. You'll throw on the ground are usually now used as decorative pillows, yes. They're not the ones that you sleep on, they're decorative. Although if you've got one and you're wanting to sit up in bed reading, then that adds extra pillow levels. So William is well aware of the fact that he's going to get in trouble, so he's making the most of the opportunity because he's going to get in trouble anyway. So here we go. He was well aware that this... skipped a bit. He was well aware that retribution was not far off. It was in the neighbouring church, to be quite exact, and would return in a carriage within the next few minutes. He was aware that an explanation of the yellow stain was yet to be demanded. He was aware that this was not a use to which the family mattresses could legitimately be put. But he cared for none of these things. In his mind's eye he only saw a crowd of small boys assembled outside a church door, with eager eyes fixed on a carriage from which descended Miss Grant, Mrs. Brown, and Mr. Brown. His life stretched before him bright and rose-coloured. A smile of triumph curved his lips. Yah! Who waited at a church for someone what never came? Yah! I hope you didn't get a bad cold waiting for me on Wednesday at the church door, he's imagining himself saying. Some folks as easy had. I bet you all believed I was coming on Wednesday. All the variations of things he could say to them. And there's a wonderful picture here. They used the alpenstock. No, it's a stick actually. It's a walking stick with a point at the end. It's not the climber's axe. They used the alpenstock in turns and it was a great help. So there you go. There's William on the pile at the bottom of pillows and bolsters, and there's Dorita, climbing up them and using the alpenstock to help her get up. Such sentences floated idly through his mind. I say, my turn for that stick with the spike. William handed it to her in silence. I say, she repeated, what do you think of this marriage business? I don't know, said William laconically. If I'd got to marry, went on the maid of honour, I'd as soon marry you as anyone. I wouldn't mind, said the page gallantly. But, he added hastily, in ornery clothes. Oh, yes, she lost her foothold and rolled down to the pile of pillows. From them came her voice, muffled but clear as ever. You bet your life, in ordinary clothes, or ornery clothes. And that's the last page of the chapter. And that's where we're finishing for today. And I do hope we have entertained you suitably for the afternoon. Sorry, I'm just trying to bookmark my page so that I have no trouble finding it again. So, did you imagine that that was the sort of trouble that he could have got into? My pleasure. I love reading for you guys. And sorry, and my brain is Marino. Hi, how are you? I did want to say hi to you before, and I was in the middle of reading, so I wasn't interrupting. Sorry. Yes, and I was trying to remember Marino's name. Pure Merino wool, that's the screen name, so that's what I'm using. Yeah, here we use our screen names. That's why I'm Jev. And you're Lemon, or Lemons, or anything else like that. So, lots of fun. I did not remember that it was so much mess and that it was actually instigated by the little child. What a mess. That's going to be so sticky and greasy. Oh my goodness, the mess. And the white satin will never ever be properly white again. It will be throwaway. Anyway, so we'll see you again next time, probably in 2 days' time. Today is Monday here in New Zealand, and I'm reading on a Monday here in New Zealand. And I will be reading, unless there's some major thing going on, I'll be reading again on Wednesday, which is in 2 days from now. And if you're watching this over on YouTube, you can probably just, if I've already got them all up on YouTube, you can probably actually just go to the next part of the playlist. And that's what our YouTube channel's for, is so that you can actually listen to a whole book right through. And it's, as I said before, it's much more like having bedtime stories than listening to audiobooks, because I interrupt myself all the time and I lose my place and all those things. Thank you for doing that, Lemon. That's wonderful. And it's fun. I mean, stories are meant to be fun, aren't they? They're meant to entertain us. And yeah, we can learn some stuff from them, but they don't have to be too preachy, because you can learn from the mistakes that people make anyway. So I look forward to seeing you next time, and have a wonderful afternoon, evening, morning, middle of the night, lunchtime, whatever it is, wherever you are in the world. And don't forget to follow me on Twitch, to subscribe and ring the bell on YouTube. And both places you will get notified when I go online if you do that. And lots of love and hugs to you as well. Bye.